Locked on Grizzlies. If you've been in the news, you've seen all the Grizzlies talk, all the draft talk lately, then you've probably read this man's coverage of that. So we're going to talk about that and a lot more. Grizzlies draft talk. Marcus Smart possibly going to Houston, and how the Rockets draft could possibly impact the Grizzlies. Coming up right here on Locked on Grizzlies.
You are Locked on Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked on Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. And today, as I alluded to in the opening, we got a special guest, Kelly Eco from The Athletic, host of the Kelly Eco Show, does terrific work over there. Kelly, how you doing, man?
Good to have you, brother. Good to be on, brother. I thought this was my show.
Yeah, look, the host of the Kelly Eco Show, host of the Locked On Grizzlies too. And you can come, we don't mind having you on here co-hosting every now and then.
Hey,
you keep putting out the content that you putting out. We'll appreciate to have you on here. But as I mentioned in the opening, we got Kelly Eco on the show here. Works at The Athletic, covers. Well, you cover the Grizzlies, you cover the Rockets, you cover the Spurs. This man's on the move.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep both feet on the ground. But this is the busiest time of the year. This is the time that we all love. We get to grind, we get to put in the extra hours. Like the run that you mentioned in pre-pro, like just the draft after the finals, the draft, free agency, summer league. Leading into training camp, like. Don't stop. So
it's a grind. They think in the off season we get some time off and we get to go to Turks and Caicos and all that, but it's a grind around here, man. But this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Now, one of the main reasons we got Kelly on for this show is he released a notebook on yesterday, and again, it's been heavily talked about in the last 24 hours. It was a Houston Rockets draft notebook. It said Draft Notebook 2.0, big board debates, domino effect, and more. And there was a lot of Grizzlies talk in this piece that Kelly wrote, and that's where I kind of want to start the conversation. As I alluded to the open, we're going to talk about the Marcus Smart thing, the Rockets draft impact. We got a lot to uncover here, so make sure you stay with us. But let's start with one part of your notebook, Kelly, that stood out to me, because here we kind of been familiar with the idea that the Grizzlies are very interested in the idea of moving up. They've been forward about the idea that they want a big man. And something I've talked a lot about is it's not just a big that they want shooters. So guys like, as you said in the story, Reed Shepherd, Dalton Connect is another name that's been popular around here. Those are the type of players that it feels like they're targeting. But again, the first question I want to ask is, because you said the Grizzlies, and then I'll let you say, but you mentioned two other teams as well that could be interested in moving up into Houston's spot at number 23. At number 3, what's the conversation been like there?
So the biggest thing pushing those conversations for teams like Memphis, for teams like Charlotte, for teams like Portland, is that they understand that all these 3 teams are looking for a big man, and all these 3 teams understand that there are probably 2 big men at the top of this draft that could probably be gone by, pick 5, Donovan Clingan and Alex Sarr. Most of the chatter that we've heard over the last couple of weeks is that it links Alex Sarr to Washington. And previously we heard, with the Hawks at number 1, they were talked about as targeting Richiche, Sarr. In the last couple of days, we've heard Clingan, because Sarr hasn't gone to actually work out for the Hawks, and Clingan has. He reportedly blew them away in the workouts. I think San Francisco wrote that in his last mock. And now you see teams understand that in a draft class that's considered pretty wide open, there isn't a consensus number 1 pick, but there are 2 potentially very good big men in this draft. And if you're a team like the Grizzlies that lost Steven Adams, that is just now getting back Brandon Clark, that still has Jaren Jackson Jr., but he is best served playing alongside another rim protector and a floor spacer. It kind of makes sense. Like, obviously, with a guy like Donovan Clingan, we don't know if his three-point shooting transfers to the NBA because he only shot 8 threes in college. We saw him shoot at the combine. Does that carry over to an NBA sitting? I'm not sure at this point. But from the standpoint of pure allure and appeal, it's clear why these teams are trying to move up and why they're trying to work the phones, talking to Houston, who I think really holds a lot of keys to the back part of the lottery. Because at number 3, if they go Reed or if they go Clingan, a lot of the activity behind that, you can start to see trades, start to see guys scrambling, trying to get because the Spurs have the number 4 and number 8 picks. So I think the Rockets hold the keys to this draft, and that's why you see teams like the Grizzlies trying to jump ahead, of guys like that 5 and 6.
Yeah, for sure. And for those that are unfamiliar with Kelly, you covered the Rockets for how long? Like exclusively just the Rockets before?
I started covering them in 2017.
Yeah.
And I've covered them exclusively until last summer.
Yeah. And you was at some Grizzlies games. Yeah. We seen you at some Grizzlies games this year. I know you did some Spurs things as well. So I guess with that being said, everything that you know about the Rockets front office, because we're kind of familiar with how the Grizzlies like to operate. I call it like a controlled aggression. They're going to be in a lot of the conversations. They want to be involved in the conversations, but rarely. Sometimes they'll make a move. They're not going to overpay too often. So the question I want to ask you is, when it comes to Houston, based on what you know about that front office and the way they like to operate, like, do you feel like they're gonna put a big price tag on this number 3 spot? What's your feeling with that?
So, from a Rockets standpoint, they are putting a huge value on the number 3 pick, just because of, even though you don't know how these players will pan out, sometimes a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. And if you can say that you have a top 3 selection, sometimes that's actually more valuable than actually picking somebody at 3. So up until that point, they're going to hold a very high premium for that pick. So if you want to get the number 3 pick, you're going to have to give them, a good win now player. You're going to have to give them a good amount of draft capital down the line. And that's why I think we haven't seen as many of those trades over the last 4 or 5 years, because teams that hold such a high premium for their assets, in the current year, it's kind of hard to get a team like Memphis to say, okay, are you going to cough up the 2025 first? Yeah. Is it going to be heavily protected? Is it going to be loosely protected? Those kind of things is where it gets tricky, and that's why you see teams talk all the time, but actually getting a deal done, it takes 2 to tango. And until the Rockets either lower their expectations, which I don't think is going to happen, or you see, like you said, the Grizzlies have operate outside of controlled aggression, I think these talks will just be talks.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, in the past, we've seen the Grizzlies and the Rockets like a couple times. So you want to go back to last summer with Dylan Brooks, the sign and trade. Right. Like Houston didn't have to do that.
It's a good relationship, right? It's a pretty good relationship there between Zach Kleiman and Raphael Stone.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see how that kind of plays out. But that is something that I monitored, the fact that Steven Adams, that deal, Dylan Brooks, that deal. There is a history. Even though they're division rivals, which I don't know. For me, when I see rival GMs working, I guess it's a give and take both ways.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, both of these teams I feel like are 2 teams that were outside of the playoffs this year, but I think it's very fair to say that Houston and the Grizzlies, expect or want to be, in that top 10 next season. But we just talked about, this Grizzlies draft impact. And then there was one thing that Kelly said in his story, and he mentioned the name Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart's been a popular name in Memphis. So we're going to talk about what exactly was said in terms of Marcus Smart's future in Memphis coming up next. But before we get to that, This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Here's the thing about PrizePicks. Go over because PrizePicks is the America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. So all you're doing is picking more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and just watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of PrizePicks' awesome community. It's very simple. All you're doing is you're picking players, you're picking stat types, and you're just selecting. And then all you do after that is you just watch the winnings roll in. So from that point on, all you got to do is download the app over at PrizePicks today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the promo code to win a first deposit match of up to $100. Coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk Marcus Smart. What's his future like in Memphis, and what did Kelly say in this story to make us even have this conversation? Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, joined here by Kelly Eco of The Athletic, covers the Grizzlies, the Rockets, the Spurs, host of the Eco. Is it the Ecosystem? Host of the Ecosystem. That name is dope, man. Did you come up with that on your own? Or?
Nah, it wasn't me. It was my boy. Shout out to my boy Ali Khan. He put it in the air a couple of years ago. I was like, hold up, what did you say? Say that again, run up back.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it's just stuck. So.
Yeah, you go check out all of Kelly's work over at The Athletic and New York Times as well. So you can check out his work in 2 different places. But getting back to the Rockets notebook on yesterday that you wrote, another thing that stood out and another thing that generated that conversation in Memphis was Marcus Smart's name being thrown into the story. Now, I'll let you kind of illustrate what was said there, but here, it's a kind of a different situation because when Marcus Smart was brought in, the idea was that was someone the Grizzlies needed, right? They lose Dylan Brooks, right. They need this wing defender, and the way that I've outlined it at this point is he's still someone you want, like you value what Marcus Smart brings, but I'm not sure if they still because of the emergence of Vince Williams. And to a lesser degree, a Gigi Jackson, even though he's still only 19, like the Grizzlies didn't have wings that they trusted going into last season. And now you got 2 guys that you can add to the rotation. It makes sense that Marcus Smart's name is brought up. So with that being said, can you illustrate just, the Rocket side of that and the Marcus Smart interest there?
So if you go back, a few years, Marcus Smart is somebody that General Manager Rafael Stone has historically been a fan of in terms of his two-way prowess, how he approaches the game, the tenacity, the grit, just the hustle, and just how he impacts winning, how he has done in Boston, even though last season in Memphis, it was injury plagued, it was unfortunate.
Right.
A lot of injuries going around. But you go to Ime Udoka now, who is the head coach, who is a huge fan of Marcus Smart, and he's somebody that is one of his biggest champions in his corner. Just the way he approaches the game and the kind of culture that Udoka has tried to build in Houston. You saw the Rockets get into a number of scraps last season because this is a head coach that bleeds that intensity, bleeds that toughness, which trickles down to his team. Obviously you factor into the part that the Rockets have a need at reserve point guard because Aaron Holiday potentially could be leaving. Amen Thompson was brought in last season, but the way he was utilized, it wasn't at the backup point guard. It was more of a do-it-all, impact player plus rebounder, switchable defender, guy they put in the short roll, they put in the dunker spot. He was doing everything. They still need a backup point guard, with the second unit. They need a guy that could also space the floor. Aaron Holiday, even though he was undersized, he was still a fantastic shooter, fantastic floor spacer. He plays the game at the right pace, the right way. You understand now Smart being that above average defender, even though he might not be the all NBA defender he was a few years back, he's still someone that can come in and add to that culture that they're building in Houston and contribute to winning, because you saw the Rockets have a top 10 defense last season. That was arguably the biggest reason why they were able to win 19 more games than the season prior. Now, Ime is someone who wants older, experienced guys around him. You know, he's from the moment he stepped into the Rockets, he's made that clear. You know, if you're going to play for him, if you're a young guy that's going to play for him, you got to defend at a high level. You just have to, because if not, he's going to always defer towards veterans. Because you can look at a guy like Jeff Green, who maybe, you know, like stats wise, he wasn't the, you know, one of the better performers on the Rockets last season, but he's older, he's experienced. Ime's going to lean on that. So he leans towards age and experience and all that stuff, winning mentality.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why you see, you know, if there was like those talks taking place, why the Rockets would ask about, you know, Marcus Smart and see his availability. And that also lends back to where the Grizzlies are as a team, you know, coming into next season, where they're going to bring back guys that were injured. John Morant's going to be back. You know, Smart, who started last season before he got hurt, he's going to be back. You know, Bane's going to be back. And this is going to be a pretty competitive team themselves. So now you look at, if you're the Grizzlies, do you think removing Smart from the rotation and, you know, potentially elevating a Vince Williams, elevating a D.J. Jackson, whoever you potentially draft, you know, at number 9, can you survive that loss? So that's where you come down to when you look at these trades and logistics.
Yeah, and in this case, this would be, you know, hypothetically a number 9 and a Marcus Smart in order for the Grizzlies to get up to 3. Like, is that what you think? If the Grizzlies want to get up to 3, is that kind of where the Marcus Smart interest could kind of come into play?
Yeah, like honestly, to get into 3, it's going to take more than Smart and 9 from Houston's standpoint. They're going to require future assets, and look, like, I understand, like, from the Rockets standpoint, why they put such a high premium on the top 3 selection, but it's one thing to actually value something at a high level and another to actually get a deal done, right?
Yeah.
If I'm Memphis and you're telling me I got to give you a top 4 protected, top 8 protected, I'm going to look at you kind of crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's still a weaker draft class than the rest, and it really depends on how badly the Grizzlies want to add a young big man, as opposed to trying to go out and add a veteran, you know, and freeze like a Nick Claxton or Isaiah Hartenstein, or trade for someone like a Clingan. Like all those things come into play, but it's just going to come down to, you know, each team's valuation.
Yeah, and why are you saying that? To switch the tones a little bit, because you said it's going to come down to how much the Grizzlies, you know, value, you know, the big man, specifically probably Donovan Clingan in particular. But you also wrote in this story about some other teams having that interest in Donovan Clingan. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but like, what's his market in particular looking like? We've seen, you know, I mean, there were mock drafts where he was being mocked 9th to the Grizzlies because, you know, a lot of those teams, like the Rockets, from 3 down to 8. They have centers for the most part. So, like, but he's been mocked, you know, as high as 3, as high as 4, as high as, you know, now you hearing talks that the Hawks even, you know, like him. What's your thoughts on, you know, Donovan Clingan's market?
It's grown, you know, over the last week, which is crazy, because coming into this draft, like, people thought of it as, even though there's no top dog in this draft, people were still trending towards Zachary Richardson and Alex Sarr. You just kept hearing them back and forth. And Clingan was always going to be, he was always considered below them. But that's why this whole draft process is crazy, because you can have evaluation and then bring someone into your franchise for a private visit and come away blown, you know, just by the impact and by the intelligence, by the intangibles. And it can actually change things within your team's big board. And that's why you see Portland, you know, even though they have a DeAndre Ayton, even though they have Robert Williams, Charlotte, even though they have a Mark Williams, you know, a Nick Richards, like, you're still seeing teams put such a high value on this kid, because statistically speaking, in college basketball, he was the most dominant big man there was in Division I basketball. Defensively, he just shut down everything that came in his path. He moved well for his size. You saw him at the combine, in the shuttle lane drill, in the sprints. Like, he moves well for his size. And then compared to a guy like a Zach Edey, a Kelly Ware, like, this is a kid that even offensively, like, he screens well. He makes the right read. He can make passes at the short roll. He's not someone that's going to, pick and pop you to death. He doesn't have that in his game yet, or the face up in his game yet. But as a fundamental big man, as a rim protector, and someone that the Grizzlies need and other teams, value, it makes a lot of sense, because Steven Adams is gone, and better than anybody the impact that Steven Adams had, in Memphis. Just that toughness, that the rebounding, the offensive rebounding for sure, and just being just a smart, cerebral basketball player. And that's what you see kind of shades of in Donovan. Even though he's bigger, wider, he still be able to play the game at the right way. And that's a credit to, playing under, Dan Hurley in Connecticut, who teaches those guys to always move the ball, always finish the play, always, defend at a high level. So that's why you see this kid's stock going through the roof over the last couple of days.
Yeah. I mean, so in so many words, it feels like for the Grizzlies, if they are to move up to 3, the Houston's gonna make them pay. It ain't gonna come cheap. So if they move up to 3, they're gonna have to probably weigh, like, is getting Donovan Clingan worth the idea of losing Marcus Smart? So listeners, let me know what you think in the comments as well. Is getting Donovan Clingan worth the idea of losing Marcus Smart? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. We got to talk about the Rockets draft a little bit, because there's kind of a correlation. Kelly said it earlier. They kind of hold the keys to the draft. We're going to talk about how those keys can kind of tie back into Memphis here in a second. But before we get to that, this show is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Remember that hiring is easy when you have this many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive for you. So all you got to do is post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk about this Rockets draft a little bit, because there's some direct ties to the Grizzlies and the Rockets situation. So we'll talk about that with Kelly coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm Damichael Cole here, joined by Kelly Eco, host of the Ecosystem Podcast, writer at The Athletic, covering the Rockets, the Grizzlies. I might as well just say you cover the division. I mean, I know they got someone covering New Orleans and Dallas, but you cover what, 3?
Tim.
Yeah,
3 teams.
Tim Cato and my guy Will.
Will Guillory. Yep,
Will Guillory. Shout out to those guys, man. But you like the 3/5 compromise over there, man. You covered 3/5. You covered 3/5 of the division.
No, saying that after Juneteenth is crazy.
but with all that being said, you spend a lot of time around the Rockets, as we said. And the thing about the Rockets is, you've said it, and I think I've said it too on previous Locked On Grizzlies shows, is you kind of look at their situation, and at number 3, the way I've looked at it on the outside looking in is like, the Rockets got a bunch of young dudes. You got the Jalen Greens, Jabari Smith, Sengun, and all these, like Amen Thompson, like Tari Eason. It doesn't feel like they need, another young prospect in a way. Like, and we saw what, Udoka targeted, last season with Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, and, now bringing in like a guy like Steven Adams. Like, there's a clear identity with those type of guys. But the first thing I want to ask you is, how realistic do you think it is that Houston even stays at number 3?
I mean, I'll put it like this. They've been in a position over the last 2 seasons where they could have traded last year's number 4 pick, right? They could have traded the year before that. They could have traded 3. They didn't. Like, it takes 2 to tango. And the Rockets historically have put a high premium, like I said before. They value these picks extremely highly. And I think right now they're excited about picking that 3. They'll still, if you want to blow them away with the offer that they can't refuse, they'll listen to them and they'll make the trade. But if they don't, they're fine at picking at 3. And that's why other teams behind them might be worried, because this is a team, like you said, they won 41 games. They were knocking on the door of the play-in last season. Theoretically, they don't need it to add another young guy in the mix, especially when your rotation is already pretty much set in stone.
Yeah.
But they still have the luxury of adding some. So that's why if you're the Rockets, you use that as kind of almost like leverage. Like if the Rockets know that the Hornets want to move up, okay, we know what you want to add. We know you looking at Donovan Clingan or Reed Shepherd. We have the opportunity to draft either of those guys. If you want to have that right, you have to move up. Portland, same goes for you. Memphis, depending on how badly you want to move up, you're gonna have to cough up some cheese. Like every pick after them, and then you have the Spurs picking at 4 and 8. So the Rockets are the last team before the Spurs can get really weird with the draft and take some guys off the board. So that's kind of why the Rockets are in this weird spot where they really hold a lot of cards, because you could see a flurry of moves after 3. If depending on how the first 2 picks shake out and how the Rockets draft, you could see teams trying to scramble to try and make some moves, because people don't want to see the Spurs. People are terrified of the Spurs having picks 4 and 8 because they're not trading those picks. So like they're gonna take 2 guys. Well, I think they're gonna take 2 guys. So if you're a team that's behind them, picking 5th, Charlotte, Detroit, you're trying to see how can you move ahead of those guys, and the only way to do that is moving in front of Houston, because the Wizards is not moving back, and the Hawks are probably not moving back.
Right.
Houston is the most realistic team that could move back in that lottery, because, like I said, they don't need to add another young guy to the mix. They're not starving for young players. They got enough as it is already.
Yeah. And another thing that you said in your piece is that Houston is kind of going star hunting in a way. We've heard all these different names. I think you mentioned Donovan Mitchell, Brandon Ingram. I've even said on here, to me, Brandon Ingram is a guy that would make sense in a way with Houston if that was the direction that they wanted to go in. But the fact that they're, I guess, going star hunting, the Grizzlies don't got any stars that they want to give up at this point. The core is pretty much locked in. And then a guy like G.G. Jackson is tables right now.
He's not going there. Yeah,
exactly. So with that being said, do you think that in a way hurts the Grizzlies' chances as compared to some other teams that may be interested in making taking 2 to tango with the Rockets, since they don't have that star a player that the Rockets are looking for to offer up?
In a way, yes, because if they were to move off of 3, I wouldn't quantify Marcus Smart as a star. He's a very good player, but is he the kind of player that turns the tide? Is he the difference between 41 games and 47? I don't know at this point in his career. Now, like a Brandon Ingram, depending on what was offered, I know the Rockets probably don't want to move him for an Alperen Sengun. They see him as too valuable. They see him as a young big man that's hasn't even scratched the surface of what he can be in his league. So that wouldn't make any sense, But if they were to move 3, it would have to be for someone that they deem to be, a 2-way competent player that can complement those guys around him and really elevate that roster to not just making the play-in, but knocking on the door of the first round, like some serious, young team, serious young team noise. So, and those kind of moves are slim picking. Like there aren't a lot of stars. We haven't heard of a lot of stars on the move. A lot of disgruntled stars. I know we heard some stuff last season with Zach LaVine, potentially being unhappy, and we see Donovan Mitchell. But from all reports I've seen, like he's probably going to sign an extension there, right? So like if he's out the running, Jaylen Brown just won a championship in Boston.
There's a lot of guys to choose from.
Ime loves him, but I don't think Jaylen Brown's going anywhere. So it's like, yeah, the pickings are pretty slim at this point. So
yeah,
I think at the end of the day, they're probably just going to end up picking at 3.
Yeah, man, that's the way it's looking. But it is an interesting draft class because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of separation between these guys. But listening to you talk and just feel like Houston is still going to put that value on that pick, saying we know these teams want to move up, and that kind of increases the value of the pick when all these teams are trying to move up and get into conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of what you've heard around the Grizzlies talk around Houston and whatnot?
Devin Carter is a name that I think, and I wanted to get your thoughts on him, like just as a prospect. He's someone that is killing workouts. He flat out destroyed the workout in San Antonio with Stephon Castle, with those guys in there. So if he's a guy that's there at 9, he should be there at 9.
Yeah.
How do you see him fitting in, with Memphis rotation?
The big thing would be like having to, figure out how they're going to play him from the standpoint of, on the ball, off the ball, all of that. But I think he's a seamless fit, for the backcourt. I think they need one more guy. Right now you got Ja, Dez, and I think Luke Kennard, and then, we'll see how his situation works out. But as of right now, you got those 3. But that 4th spot, somebody will say, oh, that's Derrick Rose. But, how reliable is that right now? Some people will say, oh, they'll just stagger, Ja and Dez, which makes sense. But it's an 82-game regular season. And if one gets a sprained ankle for 2 weeks, then what do you do? That's why I think, the idea of him, he's a shooter. And then his dad's on the staff. AC is his dad, Anthony Carter. So, who knows him better, right? So, I think he makes a lot of sense. And, listening to you talk, mention that name, he's somebody I've been following a little bit more closely lately. And he shoots the ball really well, which I know is really very high priority in Memphis. Like I tell anybody, if you've been paying attention, if you listen to Zach Kleiman and these people talk, they really look, they took their fair share of swings on guys who they were hopeful that turned into better shooters.
Right.
And it hasn't worked out up to this point. And at this point, they want guys who they know can play around Ja, Dez, Jaren, and really knock down shots. And he's someone that definitely can do that.
Right.
Yeah. So
it should be pretty interesting. What is it? Today's Thursday?
Yeah.
Or Friday? It should be pretty interesting next couple of days.
Most definitely. Kelly, man, we appreciate you for joining with us today.
Thanks for having me, man. You've been killing it. You've been killing it, bro. You've been killing it. So I appreciate you. I watch the show, so anytime you can bring me on up, I'm on game.
Yeah, y'all heard the man. He ready to join anytime. So we definitely gonna take advantage of that for sure. I know we talked about it earlier, but let the people know how they can find all your stuff.
Subscribe to The Athletic. We have a $1 a month deal going on right now, which is pretty sweet. This is the best time to join. Get all the best coverage around the NBA. Follow me on Twitter, Kelly Ego. I got a new show coming, a new podcast coming with Daniel House and Gerald Green called The Greenhouse. It's gonna be tight.
Ooh.
It's gonna be tight. It's gonna be tight. So be on the lookout for that. We're planning the final stages of that. So it's gonna be funny as hell. So look out for that. But I'm gonna keep on chugging away.
Daniel House and Gerald Green, I could only imagine, man. But before we get you out of here too, this is one more thing, because y'all kind of got a little former Grizz flavor going on over there. I'm sure since we got
the Houston Grizzlies over there.
Yeah, it's the Houston Grizzlies, right? So I'm sure the people want to get a check in on Steven Adams for sure, but to a lesser degree Dillon Brooks as well. That one's it's been a year without Dillon Brooks at this point, but Steven Adams, I've been reading it and keeping up. It sounds like he's doing better. And we didn't hear the word better in Memphis a lot. We heard it one time, and 2 weeks later, he was out for the season. it was in the preseason. So just give people update how Steven Adams doing and even Dylan Brooks.
The last time I saw Steven Adams, I think someone showed me he was eating on the beach with his girl, eating lobster or some shit. So he's living his best life. He ain't nowhere near Houston right now. But I mean he seems to be in good spirits, which is good because the Rockets plan to use him quite heavily next season, from what I understand. But hey, this is draft night. He might be a trade chip. You never know with the NBA. He's an expiring contract, $12.5 million. It makes a lot of sense. But with DB, you know how DB is, man. He just likes to live. He likes to enjoy his money. You know what I'm saying? He likes to find the things, the fashion. He's brilliant to the fashion stuff. But he's doing good. I think he's probably excited to play for Team Canada and probably use that as a launching pad into next season. I know this season he didn't have the best overall year that he might have expected to have, especially coming off a second team all defense. But I'm pretty sure, getting that year under his system, getting acclimated to Houston, acclimated to Emil Doka, understanding his teammates better, you'll now have a proper understanding of how to be an effective two-way guy, down the line, because they need him a lot. Then he's one that sets their identity. He's the one that sets the tone for their culture, for their grit and their grind. And he's the person. He is arguably their defensive heartbeat. So they need Dylan at his A game if they actually want to go from a pretty good team, pretty excited team to, okay, well, we're trying to make the play. I'm trying to make the playoffs type of team. So
all that sound like Memphis, the defensive heartbeat, even the liking his money. Dylan Brooks once told me when he was getting fined a lot, he said it's just paper. So, that's Dylan Brooks for you. But before we get out of here, everybody, just remember that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Once again, Kelly, appreciate you for joining Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure, everyone, you go check out his work. Go check out my work at thecommercialappeal.com. This is it for this week. Next week, we're diving deeper into the draft coverage. Of course, we'll have Zach Kleiman's comments on everything that the Grizzlies will do. We'll have mock draft next week as well. Make sure you stay tuned for all of that. Appreciate you again for joining us, Kelly. And make sure everybody, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you go check that out. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.